us on David's team, I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to committing to spend 30 minutes of your day with us today. Although our time together is quite brief, we're confident that you're going to find value in this session. I see we have some first timers today. Some of you may know David has more than 35 years of experience as a family therapist, workshop facilitator, lecturer, and advisor to leadership executives from all over the world. He's worked with CEOs from companies such as WestJet, Investors Group, Lilydale, PharmaSave, and presented to countless organizations over the last several decades. He's a best-selling author and very well-respected thought leader in the leadership community. David is so passionate about helping leaders connect with their authentic selves, and he has a genuine gift for connecting people with the best versions of themselves. Before joining David's team, I attended an 8-week masterclass that he offered, and the changes that I recognized in myself, as well as my colleagues, were truly phenomenal. He helped us connect with ourselves, each other, and our teams in a way that we had really been struggling with in the face of challenges presented by COVID-19. He helped us find more confidence, clarity, compassion, and helped us show up as the leaders that our team deserved. It was because of this incredible transformation that I felt so passionate about joining David's team and helping him with his mission. Today's topic, fostering trust, how to make a connection, is the 5th of 8 mini sessions where David will be sharing leadership insights and offering a small sample of what you will experience at his 3-day online Authentic Leadership Academy in April. In April's Academy, we will of course be diving into this topic as well as many others in much greater depth. It's going to be truly transformational. And as you listen to today's session, you may feel that you're called to join us for the Academy, where we would love to have you. At the end of today's session, we'll let you know a little bit more about how you can sign up for the Academy. Also, if you find value in today's session, we would really appreciate you sharing an invite to our next mini session with someone in your life. Perhaps a new leader in your organization, a new parent, or a friend who's been struggling with the great responsibility of leadership and could use some renewed passion. We'll be posting links to next week's session in the chat, as well as the Leadership Academy, and it would really mean a lot to us if you could pass it along and help us grow an amazing community of change makers. Next week will be very timely as David speaks to embracing change, how to navigate your team through uncertainty and volatility. When it comes to leadership and learning, the journey and the responsibility never end. So thank you again for joining us this morning. It's always so encouraging and energizing to see so many leaders who are committed to learning and growing and showing up as the best versions of themselves. So without further ado, here's David.
Thank you so much, Kristen. You're a great contributor on this team, and I appreciate you. We missed you. Appreciate so much. We missed you the last 2 weeks. I know you were away, and you are greatly missed. So thank you for that introduction and for your presence this morning. All right, we are going to talk about trust today. Let me just give you a little bit of perspective of a context of where we go here. For those of you who don't know me well, my whole philosophy is based on this book. That this is a model that I use in leadership, and on the outside is culture in that orange circle. In the middle circle are leadership practices, and in the middle is leadership presence, like who you are as a human being. And it's my premise that these inner qualities matter more than practices. Practices matter, but these inner qualities matter more. And so what we're moving today toward the practices. We've spent the last 4 sessions looking at who you are as a person, and now we're going to begin to move into presence. So this is can be a potentially, people tell me, a transformational experience. And you're going to be transformed in many ways. It's very unique to each person. Some people are transformed by getting more clarity about their vision and their values and their purpose in life. Some people are transformed by getting more confidence, and some people are transformed by just opening their heart to the people around them, to themselves, and to their people around them. But we're going to move into this. This is the agenda for the 3 days, and we're moving into now day 2, which is to give you a taste of what this thing called trust really means. So we're going to talk about trust today. Trust is a weird thing. You know, we talk about it all the time. It's used in organizational development a lot as leadership. We all have to trust each other. What do we actually mean? And it's a weird thing because it's a little bit like oxygen. If you stop and think about all the people in your life right now that you have a trusting relationship with, might be a significant other, a spouse, marriage partner, it could be a business partner, a friend, anybody in your life that you trust. I'm going to hazard a guess that you probably haven't talked about trust in that relationship for the past several, maybe years, that you've really never talked about trust, because it's there. It's like oxygen in that it's around all the time, but we don't talk about oxygen. You don't really know, you don't really talk about it until it's not there. And so I'm just going to shine a light on trust today. I'm going to have you really look at what we really mean by trust and just kind of open your heart to the whole thing. I'm going to start with a story. And this story is my own experience. So we were in Utah several years ago when my kids were younger, and we were hiking. And one of the things that we did is we said, we're going to go and do some exploring caves. Now, this is Timpanogos Cave up in northern Utah. And we had planned this event that we're going to go to this cave. And this looks like quite an adventure. It's about an hour and a half tour through here that you get guided by the park ranger. And it looks like a really exciting thing, except I have really bad claustrophobia. And I was sweating this event, this experience, for probably days before it happened. I would wake up in a cold sweat. Can I really do this? And I wanted to prove to my kids that I can do this, that their dad can get through anything, and that I'm going to model some bravery here and some courage. And when we got to there, I didn't say anything about my claustrophobia. I was shaking, but I said, well, no, we can do this. And we had this little range. There's about a dozen people that the ranger takes through on the tour guide. And so this is the cave that you enter. And about 2 minutes in, I lost it. And my anxiety took over, and I started to sweat, and I just said, I can't do this. And I moved to the front of the line, quickly moved to the front of the line, and I got the guide's attention. And I said, I didn't tell you this, but I get really, really bad claustrophobia. I don't think I can make it. And he put his arm on my shoulder, and he gave me the light, gave me the flashlight, and he said, you know what? I got you. We'll get through this. And you take the light, and I'll walk beside you, and we'll do it. And I trusted him. And he put me at the front of the pack and the front of the team, and we went through together. And it was a life-changing experience for me. I got through it, and I got out the other end. And there was something about the whole thing that taught me a great deal about opening your heart, being vulnerable. What was it about this man that enabled me to trust him? And we actually became good friends. And he talked about his vision. He was a school teacher. He did this in the summer, and we stayed in touch for several months afterwards. So this is Royce Shelley was his name. And my definition of trust, if you can break it down, and I'll try to just kind of give it some structure here for you to shine a light on it so it's repeatable a bit, is it's a belief in and a reliance upon someone or something. And so there's a relational component, there's a connectability component to trust, and there's a reliant upon, there's an accountability component. So there's a rational component and there's a relational component. Now we're going to cover the relational component to trust. In 2 weeks, next week, we're talking about navigating change. And then in 2 weeks, I'm going to talk about introducing you to the whole notion of accountability, which is another misunderstood word in organizations today. So if you use this as an example, you somehow or other trusted to come to this session today. So either you heard somebody else who had heard me, or you heard something about me, but something in you initiated an action to say, I'm going to believe in this person, and I'm going to open my mind to the possibility that this could have some value for me. Now, if I didn't show up and I was incompetent today, it wouldn't take long for people to distrust me. That's the reliability piece. And, you know, you might cut me some slack once, but if I didn't show up 2 sessions in a row and you never heard from me, I would not get too many repeats. The trust would be broken. The other thing about trust is that it's a delicate flower, and you can spend 50 years developing trust in a relationship, and it can be broken in one decision, can be eroded. So you have to take very good care of trust. But the paradox in it is that it is like oxygen. It's life. It's the glue that holds a relationship together, but it's not something that you want to necessarily work on all the time. But if you do these 2 things, the trust will emerge from it. So you all understand that if I didn't show up today and I wasn't competent and you couldn't rely on me, the trust would be eroded very quickly. But I could show up and I can be competent. But then there's this element of connectability. If we don't connect, if I'm not real with you, if I'm not human with you, and I don't connect with I'm not going to be believable. And so there's another component where reliance upon somebody, that accountability piece is necessary, but it's not sufficient for us to really build a relationship together. Leadership without trust, folks, is compliance, but leadership with trust is commitment. You have to get to people's hearts before you ask them for a hand, and people buy into the leader, John Maxwell says, and then they buy into the vision. So there has to be this human quality, and we all understand this intuitively, and I'm simply shining a light on it. So how do you know if people trust you? We talk about it all the time. How do you know if people trust you? We could all come up with this with our own list. In fact, it may be a list that you take back to your team. How do we know here that people trust? Here's my list. They seek your advice. We don't seek advice. You can be compliant with people if they're in a position of authority. But if you don't trust them, you're not going to go to them for advice. You might be polite about it, but you're not going to genuinely ask for polite. They ask for your help. Honesty, they bring you the bad news. There's always bad news. We talked about the shadow side last week and the hidden side of yourself. Well, that's part of every relationship, and they'll bring you the bad news. They feel free to do that. They bring you the good news. They challenge you. There's commitment and engagement, and you're relaxed. There's a really good indicator. How you are on a team is how other people are. If you're connected to yourself, you begin to realize that other people will be trusting too. If you're tense and you're not feeling safe, then people around you are going to feel the same way. So you're a good monitor. Your own internal guide, your own internal compass is a good monitor for this. So I am going to tell you another story. This is the tale of 2 dogs, just to illustrate what trust means to me. Now, we have 2 dogs in our home, Lenny and Enzo, and they're 2 very different dogs with very different temperaments, just like human beings. When you have a team, you have very different people. If we're all the same, gosh, we don't need each other. Now, Lenny on the left here, this is his stance. He will lie with his legs spread like this. His job in life is to manipulate you, to scratch his stomach. So he will lie like this probably half the day, until you want to take him for a walk. But this is what he is in life. Now, Enzo, on the other hand, is a very different animal. He's very distrusting. And I'll share with you the story of each of these dogs because their history is very different. Now, Lenny was raised with people. From the time he was born, he was handled by people. This is my daughter. And when he was 3 months old, you could tell that he had been, from day one, he'd been picked up by people. He'd been coddled by people. He had been imprinted to people. It was in his DNA to trust. It was inherent in him. Now, I believe that we come into this world trusting, but we learn not to trust. It's like creativity. We're all born creative, but we learn not to be creative. We pattern it out of our being. But Lenny, his tendency to trust was fostered and was nourished and was built so that he was bonded to people right from day one. Enzo rather came from the Humane Society, and to the best of our knowledge, he wasn't abused, but he was kept in a kennel for 10 months. His formative months in life were such that he developed a sense of independence, and he has always been very independent and very shy. And so he doesn't openly trust. And so it's just not in his nature. As I say, he's not, I don't think he was abused because he doesn't have any violence in him. He's not aggressive in any way, but he's just very, very timid and very shy. It's taken Val, who's really the caregiver in our home. It's taken her probably 3-4 years before Enzo would feel comfortable enough around Val to be vulnerable and to open up and to engage in this way. And so what kind of a space did Val create for this dog to help him feel safe? It's very interesting. I took a course from a cellular biologist about 3 years ago, it's about a year before the pandemic, on leadership from a cellular biological perspective. And what we learned is that all cells in the human body are designed for two purposes: to either protect or to grow. And you can't do both, but you have to, a cell that can't function with both of those abilities will die. And so you have to protect and you have to grow, and you have to know when to protect and when to grow. In fact, what cancer is when you've lost the ability to protect itself, and all cells do is they just continue to grow. And there isn't a shutdown valve to protect the organism from that growth. That's really essentially my understanding of what cancer is. And so that we learn from this. So you have to create an environment. And by the way, if you want to go more deeply into this work around psychological safety, we'll certainly cover it more in the Academy, but I have a webinar coming up on Thursday. And I'm assuming that, Kristen's going to be putting the link to all of my, all the work that we do. And if you want to come and hear more about the whole notion of psychological safety and creating safety in an organization, I would suggest you tune into the complimentary webinar on Thursday. Nonetheless, the short version of it is we have to create a place where we're not protecting ourselves. And if, we're taught, leadership is what we got to, we've got to earn respect. It doesn't matter if you're liked or not, you got to earn respect, and we're going to do this out of fear. But if you put people into a stress response, you put people into a fight or flight response, an activated response, their brain is not capable of growing because they're protecting themselves. You can't do both at the same time. And you must be really mindful in your relationships. How safe do people feel? Are you creating a place where people can be who they are? I don't know if you've ever worked in a place where you have to leave who you are at the door. What happens to your level of productivity? The opposite of engagement is not disengagement. The opposite of engagement is polite. And this is one of the things that you begin to be aware of, if knowing when people aren't engaged, is when they're being polite with you. And one of the ways to assess how safe people feel is just to ask them, on a scale of 1 to 10, how safe do you feel in our relationship right now? And the worst number, 1 would be you feel completely unsafe. 10 means you're completely feeling safe, that you can be any. And the worst number is what? The worst number is not 1, because if they're not safe, they're not going to tell you that they're not safe. The worst number to get is 5. That's what we call a polite response, which says, you know what, I really don't trust you, but I'm going to be polite. It's not too cold and it's not too hot. We'll just do the safe number here, okay? So the question that I'm going to be asking you, and anybody who's flown a great deal will have been asked at least once this question: are you connecting? Now, obviously, the person here is asking whether you're connecting on a flight, but it's a good question to ask yourself. Are you connecting with the people around you? If you're in a family, are you connecting? Are you connecting with your team? This is a trust question. And by the way, I wouldn't even be concerned about trust. What I would be concerned about is connecting. And then when we get into accountability, it'll be around, am I reliable? Am I accountable? We always, so much easier to see a lack of accountability in other people. Anyway, let me keep focused on the connecting piece. Are you connecting? Connect before you expect. Before, we walk into an organization and we give people a job description and we say, this is your job here. Well, ask yourself, are you connecting with that person first? Are you building in a relationship? Now, I'm just shining a light on what many of you know intuitively. Some, all the good leaders on this call will do this intuitively, but all I'm doing is breaking it down and being explicit about an intuitive process. I remember when I was traveling and my kids were little, and I would come home, and after maybe 3 or 4 days, I hadn't seen them, and I noticed they weren't doing their chores and their rooms were a mess, and I'd start harping on them. I'd start, harping on them and getting on their case. Come on, you guys. And it was my way of feeling a part of the family, because I'd felt as an outsider, and and my wife would very gently and very lovingly put her arms around me and say, Dave, let's just step back for that. Maybe it's good if you practice what you preach. Connect before you expect. Those kids needed a relationship with me before I started harping on them. They needed some trust there. They needed some relationship before. People need to feel a part of something before we expect something from them. What are we doing to build that relationship before we expect? Everybody communicates, folks, but very few of us connect. And this is what's troubling me in our world today, is that we're all isolating into our devices. It's been estimated we're going to spend 5 years of our lives looking down at these things called devices. And, they're good tools, but let's make sure that we realize they're tools, not our slaves. Let's be really mindful of the dopamine hits that we get out of picking up our notifications. We know this from research, that if you take your device before you have a conversation with somebody and open your drawer, your desk drawer, and put that device in that drawer, the conversation will be very, very different when you look at a person in the eyes and you say, non-verbally, you are the most important thing in my life, most important person, the most important relationship right now in my life is you. Nothing else matters. We know from research that if you hold your device while you're having a conversation with someone, it will impact the level of engagement in that conversation. And you know what, frankly, as I get back to doing more in-person events, and I did an in-person event last week, and I'm going up to Grand Prairie up in northern Alberta here to do an event next week. I'm feeling out of practice socially. All of our work has been done. It's been a great tool to have these Zoom calls and work over the internet, but I'm out of practice, and I just realized that I'm just starting to be honest about that with people and just saying, let's bear with each other as we learn to get back at having face-to-face conversations with each other. Steve Covey taught me, who is really an impactful mentor in my life, taught me to use the analogy of the trust account in our lives. That a relationship is like a bank account, and there's a very basic principle in banking that you can't make a withdrawal until you make deposits. Now, if you live together and work together, you are going to make withdrawals, either perceived withdrawals or deliberate withdrawals. Hopefully it's not deliberate withdrawals, but we just get perceived we're complex human beings, and we're going to be perceived as saying, hey, that was a withdrawal from the account. Well, we have to be very intentional on making deposits in those relationships. So one of the things that if we had more time today, but you can do this on your own, just take a little inventory of all the relationships in your life. And you could have 2 lists. You could have relationships in your personal life, relationships in your work life, and then just ask yourself, maybe they're kids, maybe they're nieces, nephews, maybe they're colleagues, your boss, your clients, your customers, and just ask yourself, how are those deposits? Where am I at? Am I in the black or am I in the pink? If you're in the black, what have you done to make deposits into that relationship? Every relationship will start off relatively neutral, in balance. And then from there on, what do we make deposits or do we make withdrawals? And when we do this all the time, and all I'm doing is shining a light on it to have us be intentional around how do we make deposits. Now, there are 4, as we learn, as you get into this in more detail, there's essentially 4 principles that you want to really pay attention to when we're talking about making deposits. How do we express appreciation to people? How do we recognize people? How do we have empathy, and how vulnerable are we in that relationship? These are all ways that we make deposits. Now, you could probably extend that. These are the 4 that I tend to focus on. And what I want to do today is just leave you a really practical little model here around appreciation. Now, a guy by the name of Gary Chapman wrote a book years ago for couples on the 5 love languages. And then what he's since done is rewrite the book write a book in the context of organizations with his colleague Paul White on the 5 languages of appreciation. And know within yourself that what is your primary language? We all have a primary and probably a secondary language that we use to express appreciation. My primary language is words. If you want to express appreciation to me, write me an email, put me a note in the chat room. Let me know that this is I have a file that's, before computers, I have called it my encouragement file of all the encouragement that I've had over the years. And since I've then put it on my disk, or at least I still have that file, but I've also transferred it over to having a file on my computer that lists all the encouragement words. And if I'm having a bad day, I will go and listen and read those encouraging words, because sometimes I have to remind myself, am I doing any good in the world? And it's words that really mean a lot to me. I also like physical touch. I'm a hugs and handshake guy. It's one of the reasons why the pandemic has been very hard for me, because I like to be in physical contact with people. I like to look people in the eye. My wife, on the other hand, words, she's not a person of many words. She's very quiet. She's very reserved, but she creates a beautiful, safe place. And, for years, I can tell Val, you're the most magnificent woman in the whole world. And I'll write there this magnificent cards, because that's my language. And she'll look at, it's not like she discards it, but she'll read it and say, okay, yeah, that's nice. Thanks. Okay. What are we going to have for supper? And so it's like, the words really don't sink in. She loves gifts, but I will always tell you that if I buy her flowers, it's not that she doesn't appreciate them. She values them, but she will, if you take her aside, she'll say, flowers are they're easy. They come cheap. Anybody can buy anybody flowers. But I'll tell you, if you want to show my wife appreciation, pick up the vacuum, do some work around the house. Be involved she loves acts of service. This is how she gives, and this is how she receives. And when we're working on projects together, when we're gardening together, when we're working on the business together and we're building, when we worked on parenting together, this is where she really felt valued and appreciated, when she's part of that team. So we can miss each other and say, well, you're not telling me good words, nice words, and I'm not acting in service. So that can be a perceived withdrawal when you're actually trying to make a deposit. So look around your world right now. This is what I'll leave you with this morning. Look around your world, find out the people that matter most to you, and ask them, what is their language of appreciation? How do you express appreciation? What's your language? And how do they receive appreciation? And just begin to really listen to people and really understand their world a little more. Well, folks, I hope that it's been a very short amount of time that we've had together, and just let me leave you this thought. I hope that I've left you something to think about in this whole area of trust and relationships and connecting with people. And again, I'm going to give you an invitation to join us in this 3-day. It might well be the last online transformational academy that I'm going to be offering, because we really do want to get these in the fall in person. But I'll tell you something, that this is a rare opportunity to get people around the country who will be in attendance. And I have to tell you, it is filling up. So I just want to say, if you want to go deeper with this, we're going to take the sale price. There's a sale price right now on our website. If you turn to the website, and it's going to be coming off at the end of the month. So just so you know, and some people tell us again that they get this transformation is unique for everybody. For some people, they come out of here with confidence. Some people come out of it with more clarity. Some people open their heart and really learn how to connect in different ways. These are just some of the ways that people transform, that they express their transformation in going through this experience. So I hope you'll join me, and feel free to join me. Next week, we're on at the same time. We'll see you at the next session, and I'll stay around for a few minutes. If you have any immediate thoughts, reflections that you're taking away from, or if you have any questions. And on that note, I will stop sharing and we'll come back as a whole group.